We're gonna make it look fly with some DIY. We're gonna make it look fly with some DIY. We're gonna make it look fly with some DIY. Uh-oh, thrift diving.
Hey, what's up? It's Serena Pia from ThriftDiving.com, which is a do-it-yourself blog, YouTube channel, and podcast that helps you decorate, improve, and maintain your home with paint, power tools, and thrift stores without sacrificing your budget, the environment, or style. Welcome to episode 104 of the Thrift Diving Podcast. I am really excited about today's episode because we are talking about a topic that is near and dear to my heart. We are talking about journaling. Now, before you turn this off, if you say, look, I'm not a writer, I don't really like to write. It's not one of my strong things that I do. So I'm not going to listen to this podcast. I'm going to tell you to actually listen because you don't necessarily have to be a writer in order to journal. A lot of times we think journaling is just writing pages and pages of stuff. And for some of us, that's me, that's the truth. But you don't have to be an elaborate writer in order to document your life. But we're not even just talking about documenting your life. We're talking about documenting all the things that you do that are important to you. And one of the things that I like to do, or that I've done, what I consider to be a journal, is writing my blog. All the pictures that I've taken, all the video clips that I've taken. And, I'm lucky that I'm able to do this as a career, being able to document the projects that I'm doing, because for me, it is like a journal. I'm telling you a story of how I've taken a project from point A to point B to point C. And oh my gosh, I kind of lost my way along point D, but I finally got to the end. And here's all the things that happened to make it turn out the way I kind of envisioned. Sometimes it doesn't always turn out exactly the way that I envisioned, but usually I'm able to work through a project. And that's valuable lessons that I've learned about all the projects that I've done. Whether it's something that I've never done before, like building a walk-in closet that I did about 2 years ago, whether it's putting down flooring. Sometimes it's a project I've never done. Sometimes it's a project that I've done several times and I still may have run into problems. But when I'm documenting these things, it feels very much like a journal. It's something that I'm able to look back on and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I actually did that project, or I remember when I did that, and here's all the things that I learned and the knowledge that I gained. And I started thinking about this topic this week because, I've got this big container of journals, and these are written journals. I've got some journals that are electronic, but really almost, I would say my entire life from middle school, I would say, I've been journaling. I've been writing, documenting my life, and I keep it by the side of my bed. Literally, I have this big container and there's notebooks upon notebooks that I have stored in this container. And I started thinking about actually going back through these notebooks and sort of rediscovering who I was when I was 15, 16, 17. And I've got journals. I think my earliest one is 15. I may have to look. I think I may have one from like 13, 14. But I would say probably 15 is when I started, and I still keep a journal. Now, of course, I keep it electronically, but I have all these notebooks, all of this rich history of my life that I started looking back over and reading. And of course, they're all thrown into this box. I don't know which one is, the first one. I sort of just pull them out and just start reading it at random. And then I remember, oh yeah, this is when we finally got our first condo, or, oh, this is right before I went to college. It's so interesting. I cannot believe that I have all of this rich information about my life. I'll tell you, I have a very bad memory. I mean, let me tell you how bad my memory is. One time I was at, I think it was maybe like my 15-year high school reunion. And some of the women were talking about the 10-year. And I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe I missed the 10-year. And they said, no, Serena, you were there. And I could not remember anything about this 10-year reunion. I guess maybe it was just so uneventful that it just slipped my mind. And I mean, you're probably thinking, wow, is she okay? But literally my memory has always been this way. If I don't document it, then I forget that it happens. And sometimes what I'm learning, even though I document things, I forget that it even happened. And usually it's things from, years past. And if it's not significant to me, I kind of don't remember that it even happened. But the things that I do remember, it is really interesting to look back over when I had written about this or when I took pictures or videos and actually reliving that and seeing what kind of, I don't want to say rich data, but it feels like data. It's like I'm collecting data on who I used to be and how I got to where I am now and being able to build that bridge between who I was and who I am now. And I think the value in this, not just personally, but also when it comes to your home. Think about when you first moved into your home. How long have you lived there? So let's say you've lived in your home 10 years. This home has gone through so many transformations. I bet you don't even really remember what it looked like when you first moved in because you've made so many changes or you've made a change and you've been living with that change for so many years. You kind of forget what it really looked like when you first moved in. So, you happen to take some pictures. Well, maybe you find one of these pictures and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe our backyard used to look like this. Or when you see something that maybe you changed after you moved in, it brings up those feelings of like, oh, I remember that laminate flooring in the kitchen. I can't believe that floor looked like that. I'm so glad we got a new floor. And it helps you to relive that experience of what it was like when you first bought that house. Or let's say you're journaling personally, or when you first met your spouse, or when you first met your best friend and some of the things that you and her or he had done together. It's like getting to relive that experience all over. Because I think what happens is that we get caught up in our lives in this moment. And I know people say you really only have the present, right? The past is a mystery. No, how does it go? You know the saying, the past is history, the future is a mystery, and the current, like the present is a gift. Right? Like we all know that saying. But I really think it's fun to go back and relive your history. I mean, not if it's painful, right? I mean, that's probably something you'd have to go to therapy for, and there's nothing wrong with therapy. But just going back over your life and your history and seeing how you or your house came to be from where it started to where it is now. It all tells the story of your life. It tells the story of your home. Your home is where you spend, well, outside of work. And if you work from home, then you literally spend all your time generally at your home, but maybe you work outside of the home or you work in the home. Your home is such a huge part of your life, and documenting that helps you to relive that experience. So I'll give you an example. When my husband and I bought this house, it's a 1973's, old, prettiest house. Well, no, not prettiest, ugliest house on a pretty block. Let's put it that way. And before we moved in, we were here maybe, I guess about a good month. We were staying at my mother-in-law's place, and we would come over every night from like 9 till 1 in the morning. And we would start scouring the walls, removing the wallpaper. And, after a few hours, we're like, okay, we're done. We're going to have to come back again tomorrow night. And sometimes you forget that experience of the excitement of buying your new home and the fear of like, oh my gosh, look at all this wallpaper we have to remove. How are we going to get through this? And now that we removed the wallpaper, we've got brown paper bag marks all over the walls. Now we have to repair these walls and paint them. Going through that process, as I'm even just thinking about it, it's actually kind of fun. It's kind of fun to relive that. And the reason why is because I know where we are now, right? Like I can walk into my house and see the progress that we've made from, those first nights of coming over at 9 to 1 in the morning, trying to make progress before we actually moved in, to now when you walk in, you're like, wow, I've done some things around here. It's fun to relive that. And sometimes you forget where you come from unless you pull out some pictures and you're like, whoa, yeah, I remember that night. I remember that first night we decided, yep, let's just start removing wallpaper. And the feelings that were associated with that, right? The fear, the excitement, the progress, and all of those things just wrapped up in one picture. Now, when I first started thrift diving, it wasn't even called thrift diving. It was called From House to Home. And the URL the URL, it wasn't like from house2home.com. It was, blogspot.rehab2fab. I mean, the names didn't even match, but it was my place of documenting everything that we were doing in the house. And when I look back on some of those earlier posts and see those pictures and how I was documenting, I was basically journaling my house. It just felt so good, or it feels good to this day to look back and have that knowledge. And so the reason why I'm talking about this is because I want you for 2023 to start documenting your projects, start documenting your life, your house, the changes that you're making. It could just be taking pictures and putting them in a special album and putting a folder on your hard drive or wherever you want to keep them. I would definitely recommend putting them on like a Google Drive so that you have them, they're on the cloud. You don't destroy your computer and then all your pictures are gone, but have a way to back them up on the cloud, maybe even Dropbox, and start a folder with all of the different rooms or spaces in your house. So you've got your living room folder, your bedroom folder, your outdoors. And as you change your home over the years, start putting these pictures into these folders so that you can start documenting, even with just pictures or video clips, the things that you're doing to your home. And, if you really think that you want to take this a little further, open up a Google Doc and start typing about the things that you're doing, the projects that you're doing. Maybe the fear that you have of starting a new project, or you're not really quite sure how to get started. And maybe you're just putting some pictures into that Google Doc, right? Just drag and drop. And you're talking about things that you want to do in a particular room. It's a lot of fun. And, because you're not putting it on a public page, you could do this on Facebook if you want, but who knows where Facebook will be 10, 15 years from now. You want to make sure that you're putting this information in a place where you can protect it, right? So, you don't even know where Google's going to be. So maybe you have it on a Word document on, a thumb drive or something like that, but some way to keep track of the things that you're doing, your thoughts and feelings about the projects that you're going to tackle. It's a lot of fun to read back over these years later when you've already kind of mastered that project and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that I was so afraid to tackle that. And it wasn't even a big deal. And look how fabulous it turned out. So, really, it's like blogging, but I'm not going to tell you to go and, pick a URL and go put it online for everybody to see. No, I'm telling you to create this for yourself because it feels therapeutic when you are able to talk about the things that you love most, your home, your children, your husband, your wife, your spouse, whoever, and you're putting all of this into a journal. It's very therapeutic and it feels like having a friend that's always there. That's how I feel when I journal, because not every situation or every project I want to call a friend up and say, hey, I'm kind of feeling this way about this project or about this person or about this thing in my life. Now, there are people that I can call up and say those things to, but sometimes when that conversation's done, you kind of forget that you felt that way, right? And years later, you don't even remember that you felt that way. But it's interesting to look back and see how you've transformed yourself over the years. And, I'll share with you how I got started with journaling. I think I may have told you in a previous episode that I was really inspired way back in middle school. And I started reading my favorite series of books, The Sweet Valley Twins. Remember Elizabeth and Jessica? I loved this series of books. It was just so much fun reading about these two twins. One was more studious, one was more outgoing, and they were just complete opposites. And Elizabeth, she was the one who was more conservative and just very studious, and she loved to journal, and she'd write about her boyfriend. I think his name was Todd. She'd journal about Todd and her best friend Enid and all these things that she loved to talk about in her journal. And for some reason, it just sparked me to get my own composition book, the black and white one, and just start journaling about most likely whatever boy I liked at that time. There weren't deep thoughts in there, but I started writing and I continued to do it through high school. I continued to do it through college, through my younger years, like just after graduating college. And, that sensitive time when you first graduate and you don't really know what to do with this degree that you've gotten. And you're just wondering, what do I do now? And when I was looking back over some of those journal entries, I saw a lot of confusion in this young 23-year-old Serena, like a lot of confusion, a lot of unhappiness because I didn't know what I wanted to do, which I'll tell you about in just a moment. Some of those entries that I found that were really interesting, but I continued writing during that entire time. And when I got pregnant in 2005, had my oldest son in 2006, I realized that people were writing about their children. I didn't know what a mommy blog was, but I knew that I wanted to do something where I was documenting these feelings I had about being a first-time mom, how wonderful my newborn baby was, and all the fun little things that we're doing together, really documenting those things. And when we bought our house in 2010, I didn't realize that people were actually writing about their homes. People were, quote unquote, blogging about their homes. And that's how I transitioned into blogging about my home, this 1973 home that we bought. And then that turned into thrift diving. So it really all started with Elizabeth Wakefield from Sweet Valley Twins, which is amazing. So all it takes is just that one bit of inspiration, and suddenly you are on this different track that you didn't even realize your life was heading. I'm hoping that there may be somebody who's listening to this who maybe you used to journal and you loved it, but life kind of got in the way. Maybe you don't want to sit and cramp your hand by writing in an actual journal. Maybe you just want to type it up. That's true for many people as well. I like to type as well. I can get a lot more out when I type versus writing. And it's also a little bit more secure when you're putting it in a computer versus just having it lie out on your desk somewhere. So that's how I got started, and that's how I continued. And as I'd mentioned before, if journaling is something that you want to do and you've not really done it, don't feel that you have to write multiple pages. You can just write down 3 things that you're thankful for, or maybe it went to the store today and bought paint, feeling kind of nervous. I love pink. Whatever it is that you want to write, but documenting something so that you can look back and think, wow, this was a really cool project, or this was a really great time in my life. I really want to capture that and be able to look back and appreciate that. And maybe even put some pictures, if you're doing it electronically, enclosing some pictures within that text so that you can look back and have that reference for the things that you're talking about. So I want to also just mention that you don't know exactly where you're going to be in the future. I mean, I wish we all had a crystal ball or, a magic 8-ball that we could just kind of shake it and tell us where our future is going to be. We just don't know. But one thing I think that's really interesting about journaling is that, you've got your past self, you've got your present self, and then there's your future self. And I feel like journaling is a way to kind of bring it all together, to kind of close that circle of who you really are. That's how journaling feels to me. And I'm even getting goosebumps a little bit here as I'm talking about it, because it just feels like such an amazing process when you're able to look back on who you were and who you are today. And then in the future, your future self being able to look back and see where you were or who you were and what the things that you were thinking about and the things that were causing you like great concern that later you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I was totally worried about picking a paint color for the wall. Or I can't believe that I was so nervous about moving into this house because look at what I've been able to achieve. And that right there is true. I can tell you when we moved into this house, I had so much anxiety for at least the first couple of months. I was so afraid of, what if something breaks? I don't know how to fix anything. How are we going to decorate this house? We are paying more money to live here, and now we have more space. I don't know how to decorate a house. How do we even find enough furniture without going into credit card debt to furnish this house? So it's funny when I read back on these things, these earlier, I'm going to say journal entries, but at that point I sort of turned it into an online journal. It was the earlier version of thrift diving, but looking back over these early things and knowing where I am now, it's just so interesting to see that I was very nervous about moving into this house. And now I'm like, oh yeah, I can do this. I can do that. It's an amazing feeling. So I want you to think about what your future self may want to know or read about, and then document that so that your future self can either enjoy a good laugh or, give your present self a hug because you realize you were so stressed out about something that ended up not even being anything. It's just a great experience to kind of pull that circle closed and who you really are as a person and how you developed. And honestly, when you journal, it's like having a friend. I mentioned earlier, it's like having a friend, but it's this quote unquote person, this friend, which honestly, I'm going to tell you, this friend is your future self. Let me say that again. This friend that you're journaling to is your future self. It is the person in the future who's going to look back and say, girl, let me tell you, you've grown. You're doing okay. You were doing okay. You didn't think you were doing very well, but you were actually doing a great job. And that's who we're writing to. We're writing to our future self. Sometimes when I write these journal entries, and I was just thinking about this today as I was looking back over all these entries, I feel like I want to write to my future self, like instead of just saying dear journal, which I usually don't say dear journal or dear diary. That seems very juvenile, but I almost want to say, dear future Serena, here's the things that we're thinking about today. This is what's on your mind today. Or here's the projects that you were hoping to get done and you're feeling a little uncertain that you can even tackle this so that your future self can enjoy the read, right? Like you're writing to yourself in 10 to 20 years down the line. But it feels to me a very therapeutic thing when I get to sit down and I've got half an hour, 45 minutes. I know most people are not going to dedicate that amount of time, but maybe you will. Even if it's 5 minutes, just documenting how you're feeling, what you're thinking, what you're focused on, how your home looked, and really just making it a point to document where you are at this point in time. All right, so moving on to the next one. The last reason why I think you should be documenting and journaling personally, your projects, your home, is because it does help you remember where you came from. So I want to read you something that I discovered yesterday when I was going through all of my journals, not all of them, but just, picking one up and seeing what's in there. Now, let me tell you, this is from Tuesday, March 13th, 2007. Okay, so that's, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 16 years ago. I still need my fingers to count when it comes to years. That was 16 years ago. Here's what I wrote. And at this time, my oldest son was about not quite a year old, almost a year old. And this is what I was writing about. And this is very short. I said, I think I'm fearful about taking a leap of faith and going to find something that I love doing and can make money doing. I've come to realize that my purpose, my life theme, and let me point out, theme is actually in big uppercase letters. My life theme is to create, and I underlined create because I was serious about it. My life theme is to create, to take materials and transform them into beautiful objects. And I need to find a job or create a job or career for myself doing something artsy. Isn't that freaking amazing? That was Tuesday, March 13th, 2007. When I saw that, I screenshot that. I took a picture of it and I put the date at the top of that because I want to remember that 16 years ago, I had this thought that I want to create something or find a job or create something that allowed me to live out my theme, my life's purpose, which was to create. I knew it way back then, but I couldn't envision where that was going to take me. Back in, I would say 2001, 2002 is when I discovered sewing. And I think I told you this on a recent podcast. I had discovered sewing, but even though that was the first time that I was discovering sewing, I'd always been a creative kid. I was the kid who was opening up the Sunday comics at the age of 9, and I would look at some of the cartoons in there, Garfield. I'd look at my favorite Berenstain Bear books, and I would actually draw the characters that I saw in the newspaper and in these books. And I was pretty good, actually. I was very good. In fact, I should find some of those, and then I can maybe post a link down in the show notes. We'll see. But I was pretty good at creating art, and I just loved it. But I think at some point in my life, I stopped creating, and I just focused probably on boys, on sports. I was into basketball, track, And then, of course, when I went to the University of Maryland, it was all about hanging out with friends, hanging out with my then boyfriend, now husband. I wasn't doing very much creating. So I feel like there was this period, this stretch where I wasn't very creative. And it wasn't until I had graduated University of Maryland and I was at a temporary job and I overheard some of the women talking about going to the fabric store. They're going to go to the fabric store. And I remember my ears perking up and I was like, what? Fabric store? I've always wanted to learn how to sew. Can I go with you? And they took me along. I ended up buying a sewing machine. I bought a pattern, fabric, and from there, it was on. So every weekend, I would spend my weekend making clothes, learning how to read patterns. Eventually, it turned into making silk handbags, which I was starting to try to sell on the side. And then when I had my son, I started doing some sewing for kids. So I was doing carriers, like the Mai Tai carriers that you just kind of strap across your back. I was doing those. I was doing baby carriers in addition to baby shoes, and I was doing diapers. So these were the things that I was doing, and I knew that I liked creating, but I couldn't envision how I would be able to turn that into something that would sustain me. How do I take sewing baby carriers and turn it into something that could pay my rent when I'm 20, 26, 27, whatever. But I just didn't know how I was going to make that happen. But I could tell you in looking at this journal entry, I knew what my purpose was. I just didn't know how I was going to get there. And that is what's so exciting about looking back at your journal, finding those little gems of thought, of discovering who you really were and are, and when that came to be, and how you went from that person who was like, maybe I should, this is what I want to do, to 16 years later, now having a YouTube channel and being able to make money doing, and of course, a podcast, which I'm not making money at yet, but that's okay. But how do you go from this child, I'm going to say young adult, I wasn't a child, a young adult, to then somebody who is grown, being able to make a full-time career. So, there's this beauty in what I've been able to do, but sometimes I didn't even realize I knew so far back that I wanted to do this, because this didn't exist. Blogging didn't exist. YouTube was there, but for me, it didn't exist, right? I hadn't discovered that path yet. But when you journal, you're able to look back retrospectively and see how you came to be who you are today, how you came to discover the passions that you have now, the art that you've been wanting to create. It was in you all along. Wait, isn't that something? Wait a minute. I feel like that was a line from Wizard of Oz. Was that a line from Wizard of Oz? I feel like it was. But anyway, who you are today, it was in you all along. But sometimes you're not aware of it until you go back and you start reading about your past self and you're putting all those pieces together. And it really, I think, helps you to understand who you are today. Not saying that you don't really know who you are, but it's interesting to see who you were and how you came to be who you are now. And again, the same is true for your house, your projects, your love of creating. When you are able to go back and look at all of this information and draw a picture up of who you are and what you are and why you did what you did, I don't know. I feel like it gives you a sense of, even more sense of purpose, right? Because you realize that it was in you all along, but it makes you feel, there's a word I'm looking for. It's almost like it makes you feel more powerful. That all these things, these decisions that you've made in your life, sometimes you felt, maybe I shouldn't have done that, or maybe I shouldn't have done this, but it's led you to this exact point of where you are right now. And for me, that's a good thing. Sometimes you may find yourself in a situation where you're like, I didn't really want to be here at this point. But if you have something to look back over, you can then say, well, you know what? I kind of knew back then that I wanted to do something else. Like, for example, let's say you're a nurse right now, or some other career that you didn't think you'd be doing this and you're not really happy doing it. If you have your journals to look back over, you can see where you were actually thinking, well, hey, maybe I should go to school. Maybe I should go to culinary school. And you didn't realize you wanted to do that at 22. You're thinking, I don't know, maybe Maybe it's something that you recently discovered, but no, you actually find that this is something your heart has wanted for so long because maybe that was your purpose, not to be a project manager. So I'm just going to invite you, if you're not already doing it, please start a journal. You don't have to write for long periods of time. Just document. Do a few sentences. Set a timer for 5 minutes and document. When you're doing a project or documenting your house, take some pictures of what it looks like now. And, in 5-10 years, look back and say, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I like shag rugs, green shag rugs, or whatever it is. I can't believe I liked avocado green toilets. I mean, whatever. It's just fun to look back. And I think for me, it's a form of entertainment to see who I was and how I started and how I ended up here. I just love it. All right. So those are the things that I want you to think about this week as you're going about your life and your thoughts. Maybe there's something that's bothering you. Maybe there's something that you just wish that you could talk to someone about. Open up a Google Doc and just start typing and make that be your journal. Or if you want to document your projects, take a few pictures, take a before picture, take an after picture. You don't necessarily have to do the process pictures, but take some sort of pictures to document all the amazing things that you're doing around your house. Document your life so that when you get to the end of your life, hopefully it will not be for a long time, but when you get to the end of your life, you actually have a story of your own life to look back and really enjoy. Because I don't know about you, my memory is pretty crappy. But I think even if you have a good memory, you can't possibly remember all of the thoughts that you've had, all the projects that you've done, all the amazing meals that you've had out with friends. Document those things so that you have a really good story to look back on and laugh about and ponder and just really enjoy all the things that you've done, whether it's creative projects, whether it's volunteer projects, all of those things. It's the story of you. And I want to know, do you keep a journal? Or is this something that after hearing this podcast, maybe you're going to decide to start a journal? I want to hear from you. Hit me up at Thrift Diving on Instagram, or you can email me, serena@thriftdiving.com. I love hearing from you. And you can also find me on YouTube and on thriftdiving.com. Lots of places to reach me, but I really do want to hear from you about this topic. Is this something that you currently do? Are you documenting your life? And are you actually looking back over those old journals to see how you've come full circle? I want to know. All right. I loved having this conversation. I hope that you enjoyed it too, and it gives you something to think about as you move forward with your week. Come back next week. I don't know what we'll be talking about, but of course it'll be something relevant to what's going on in my world this week. All right. I will see you next episode.
Diving. Find it ugly, make it pretty. Paint a power tools, alright. Saving money